Incredible personality that made people feel comfortable. We spent some time together only a few weeks ago when Pope Benedict XVI was here in Washington, and as you know, he's a devout Catholic, regularly attended church, was so excited to meet His Holiness, came to that little photo opportunity, that opportunity we had to shake hands with the pontiff. I'm telling you, when I saw him in that room, with the president of Catholic University who invited us. He was like a little boy, a little kid that was just so pumped.
I don't think Tim ever. I mean, that was what I loved about him. He was always a little kid. I mean, he was when the Wizards won the playoffs a couple of years ago, and we won that first round. I mean, it was unbelievable. Or when Zimmerman hit the home run opening night with the Nats. I mean, when people see him on television, they think of this sort of professional, tough journalist in pursuit of a senator, a presidential candidate. And the truth is that you hit it exactly right, Wolf. If he met the Pope, or he went to a ball game, or if it was Luke graduating from college, he had and that's why. And I just loved the guy. He had enthusiasm about all of the things that life brings to you, the Buffalo Bills. I mean, and I talked to him this week. He said he had a terrible week. He had to put his father in an extended care facility. He says the hardest day he ever had. You know, well,
whenever I saw him,
I talk to him on the phone every day. I mean, it's like I don't know. It's so difficult to comprehend. And I mean, I don't know other people have this. I'm old enough this kind of things happened to me before, but this is very, very difficult.
It's hard to believe because he was always there, and as I said, even today he was on the radio and the WTOP radio, the local all news station this morning. Every Friday morning he would do a little hit there to promote Beat the Press on Sunday, give a little political analysis. He was one hard-working journalist, and as you point out, James, I think that's because of the upbringing he had as a real blue-collar, working-class kid growing up in the south side of Buffalo. He knew his roots, and even though he had reached the peak of journalism here in the nation's capital, he never forgot where he came from, and he was always passionate about that.
Absolutely, and I think he never forgot that his dad, in those cold Buffalo mornings, was worked for the sanitation department, was the back of that truck, and emptying cans. And I think he mentioned that all the time. And he said, what I do is really not that hard. He had an unbelievable sense, and pride in his work, his pride in his church, pride in his hometown, pride in his network. He was he was a prideful guy, but he was also always had a kind of a childlike enthusiasm about the world that brought things. It was just it sounds trite, but he was just an amazing guy just as a guy, as somebody to have as a friend, just an amazing person. And the void, and when you speak to somebody, literally about the only date I generally wouldn't call him would be like on Friday, because I knew he was like getting ready for the show.
Yeah.
But Washington, I know that, everybody comes through here, but this for me, he was just part of my life here.
I know he was, and our condolences to you, too, as one of his best friends in Washington. James, I want you to stand by if you can. I want to bring in our colleague Howard Kurtz of the Washington Post and CNN's reliable sources. Howie, you obviously got to know Tim Russert rather well over these many years, and when we say he was the best of the best, we mean it. We don't just mean it because he died today, but he really was one of the outstanding journalists here in Washington.
Wolf, this guy was absolutely a force of nature. Through the force of his personality, through his insatiable desire to talk about and report on and gossip about politics, he really transformed NBC's political coverage. I think he revolutionized Sunday morning television when he took over that show, Meet the Press, in 1991. When politicians, I mean, there were many fine Sunday shows on, including yours, but when politicians go on Meet the Press because of its mass audience, presidential candidates, presidents, incumbent presidents, it was an event to see how Russert could do with his interrogation style approach. And he just loved the game, and I think that came across. Of course, he had been part of the game when he worked for Democratic politicians, then crossed over to the journalism side, and I think that came across both in his hard work, and just anybody ever watched him on the tube could see that this was somebody who was fully engaged in the art of covering politics.
And to give us a little perspective on the vacuum, the void that's going to be created now by Tim Russert's death, give us some of that perspective.
Well, you know, not only was he about as high profile as you could get, Wolf, in the television world, as NBC's Washington bureau chief, as Meet the Press moderator, as a frequent commentator on the Today Show and Nightly News and the whole panoply of programs. But this is a guy whose clout was such that when he went on the air, I remember this, it was after midnight last month on primary night, the North Carolina primary and the Indiana primary in the battle between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And he said, he didn't mince any words, he didn't say it appears to be, he said essentially Barack Obama has sewed up this nomination. That was an event, that was an earthquake. It changed the way I think a lot of other people reported on the results of those primaries. And that is the kind of, he just had the kind of stature, given that he had played the game at such a high level on both sides of the divide, the political divide and the journalistic divide, that there just aren't many like him to step in and fill that void.
Time magazine, our sister publication, Howie, only a few weeks ago named him among the 100 most important people, influential people in the world. That was a great honor. I remember when he was given that honor by Time magazine only a few weeks ago at a gala black tie dinner in New York City. At the time I saw the list, and I think he may have been the only television journalist, maybe the only journalist on that list by Time magazine. There's the website from Time magazine when he was given that hugely important award.
He was so embedded, really, in the Washington culture that it was Tim Russert's testimony of the Scooter Libby trial that sent Vice President Cheney's former aide, top aide, to a conviction, not jail, because he was the sentence was commuted by President Bush, because Scooter Libby had called Russert to complain about something and then claimed that they had talked about Valerie Plame, and Russert said that they did not. The real shame of this, I mean, in addition to the human toll for those of us who worked with him or against him or just respected the hell out of Tim Russert, is not just the loss to his friends and family and colleagues at the age of 58, but he was at the absolute top of his game, I think, in this campaign more than any other. He just seemed to be ubiquitous. It's a great race. He loved covering this race, and it's not like, you know, a lot of very good, very talented Washington and other journalists passed from the scene, but Tim Russert really was irreplaceable because, as I say, of the sheer force of his personality.
I had him on Late Edition, my Sunday show, whenever his new books would come out. Back in 2004, his bestseller, Big Russ and Me. We talked about his father. We talked about his roots growing up in Buffalo, New York. And then in 2006, Wisdom of Our Fathers, another bestseller that he released. People don't appreciate necessarily how important those books were, and the prominence, the nature, how well received they were by the book publishing, book buying community out there.
And I think that was absolutely part of the key to his appeal. You know, here he became extraordinarily famous and successful in the multi-million-dollar contract and all of that. But as you and James were talking a moment ago, he was a son of Buffalo. Father was a sanitation worker. He didn't really forget his roots, and when he would cover politics and talk about politics and interrogate politicians, he would do so with the average guy in mind. I mean, almost like a politician who has the common touch. Tim Russert, you know, the ultimate insider in some ways, knew how to translate the arcane game of politics to people like he grew up with his dad. And you know, he's a guy who wasn't born with a silver spoon. He had to raise money to put himself through college and through law school. The fact that he was a lawyer, I think, helped with his skills in interrogating public figures. And so, you know, it's a cliche to say, oh, he never forgot his roots. A lot of people do that, become really successful. I don't think Tim Russert did, and I think somehow on the screen, when you watched him, that came across.
And whenever I would run into him, Buffalo was